You are listening to Kubernetes Bytes, a podcast bringing you the latest from the world of cloud-native data management. My name is Ryan Wallner, and I'm joined by Bhavin Shah, coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. We'll be sharing our thoughts on recent cloud-native news and talking to industry experts about their experiences and challenges managing the wealth of data in today's cloud-native ecosystem. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. We're coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. Today is October 4th, 2024. Hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. Let's dive into it. Bhavin, how's it going?
I'm doing good. Yeah. It is Friday, I guess. Just has been a busy week for me. So, yeah. I'm glad it's Friday. Let's just leave it at that.
I'm always glad it's Friday.
True.
Can't
How
believe
about you?
it's already October, which is kind of wild to me. But
I know.
I'm all for this season. I don't know about anyone else, but fall is awesome. If I get out of this weather all the time, like slightly chilly in the morning and then it kind of gets nice in the afternoon, hell yeah.
Yeah, I know. Agreed.
I'm just saying.
50 to high 60s. I think that's the perfect range. It goes below 50, like, nope, come on. Yeah.
Fun stuff. Well, we do have a really fun episode coming up. We're going to dive into the news, but we do have Ofir Cohen from Wiz. We'll introduce him in just a few minutes. But why don't we dive into our news section, Bob? You want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So I had a couple of news things to talk about. KubeCost, right? I know last time we covered that they are getting acquired by IBM. They do have a new release out. So if you are a KubeCost customer or if you are looking at them, version 2.4 is out. It has a few things. One is Oracle Cloud support. So in addition to AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, they can now support Oracle Cloud as well. I'm sure they'll add IBM next. But then before the 2.4 release, all they did was they had some integrations for discovering GPU. So if you requested for X number of GPU resources, they'll show you that these have been requested, but it didn't do any real-time monitoring and it didn't have those capabilities. With this release, they fixed that, so they can actually show you real-time GPU utilization. If there is any waste, if you can maybe scale down, if you are using fractional GPUs, and it shows you the efficiency level. So if you are running at like 10% efficiency levels, maybe you can consolidate that workload on a different cluster. So KubeCost 2.4 will start allow you to do all of those things. In addition to them, they also added the ability to create budgets. So you can create a budget per team, per user. It's pretty flexible, but and then when you are getting close or you are over budget, you can get alerts by emails, webhooks, Slack, or Teams. So
I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of email and Slack messages based on those budgets.
I know, but I think the whole point of helping organizations identify the costs that they or the money that they're spending, I think having these budgets and having those annoying notifications will definitely, like, I don't know, put it front and center rather than at the end of something that people look at the end of the month or end of the quarter.
Yeah. Awareness is always good.
Yeah. No, but I agree with you. Like, a lot of Slack messages are going to get triggered by this. So that's update from KubeCost. I think another update was talking about GPUs, right? NVIDIA GPU operator and the container toolkit that they have is widely used. Like if you're using NVIDIA GPUs anywhere with Kubernetes, that's the toolkit and operator that you're using. They had a critical vulnerability released last week, or on I think the 26th of September. I know we are a couple of weeks late or a week late in talking about it, but that's when our episode is coming out. There is a CVE called CVE 2024-0132. It can lead to remote code execution, denial of service, escalation of privileges, information disclosure, and data tampering. I think that's the bingo, like all 5 things. Like that's pretty bad.
It's a bad one.
Yeah. So NVIDIA already has a fix for it. So if you this vulnerability exists in versions up to 1.6.1 and the GPU operator 24.6.1. So if you just update it to Container Toolkit 1.16.2 and operator 24.6.2, you should be good. That there is a fix and patch available, and we can thank. I think Wiz was the first one that brought out this CVE or disclosed this CVE. So I'm glad we are having Ofir on.
Very fitting.
Yeah. And then finally, the last piece I had was a new startup in our Kubernetes ecosystem, Edera. EDERA. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but they came out of stealth. at least for me. And they disclosed that they raised a $5 million seed round to build a new hypervisor for Kubernetes containers and AI workloads. So covering all the different keywords. But their whole approach is trying to improve performance for your containers by not either not sacrificing performance or not having to use infrastructure that has hardware virtualization enabled. So what they are trying to do is bring out a new hypervisor. So I think one of the co-founders started rewriting Zen in Rust to help solve these things for the company that she was working on. And again, all of this was open source. And then I think her and the other co-founders, again, all female co-founder team. So that's awesome. They decided that, okay, there is more value than that one use case. So now they have a new company focused on building that new hypervisor. So I'm looking forward to it, keeping an eye out on the company. In the list of angel investors, a familiar name, Joe Beda, popped out. So I'm sure there is some value in it if Joe Beda is giving you some angel funding. So we'll have a link in the show notes if you want to check out the company. But
I'm curious. They mention other tools like Kata containers and stuff like that. Arguing that they're kind of like a bolt-on way.
Yep.
Which, I think introducing a whole new hypervisor is always a feat in of itself. But
how do you work with, like, this will be helpful for on-prem customers, maybe. But again, organizations have a lot of inertia in adopting something new. Anyways, they're adopting Kubernetes. Changing the hypervisor itself might be a bigger uplift, but man, we'll see how the Series A, Series B, and the product market fit looks like. Again, this is just seed round, so I just wanted to share it.
It is a Kubernetes project in a lot of ways too, right? I have to read more about it, but hopefully,
so Zen in Rust, I think. I forgot the name of the co-founder that started the whole project, but she started it as an open source thing, and then they're like, okay, let's just build up a company around it. So one of the things.
Cool stuff. Well, I liked that you tapped into the NVIDIA container toolkit bug and Wiz being sort of the one there. I did have an article on here that was about cryptojacking Docker targets. So like the NVIDIA bug is basically a user escaping the container and doing some real damage. But this article on the Hacker News, I just wanted to make note of it, is really about how there's sort of a new campaign targeting exposed Docker Engine APIs, which basically will like run a bunch of scripts and spread throughout your containers and find other API endpoints and those kind of things. It just goes to show that, misconfigurations, something we'll probably bring up with over, is still something that, is constantly being kind of like tapped into by bad actors. And this article, as well as another one that I read, was titled "The Worst Place to Leave Your Secrets." And this was an interesting sort of research project, which was pretty much taking a whole bunch of different methods of leaving sort of canary tokens. So like purposely leaving things out there and seeing how quickly they get pulled in. So things in GitHub, things in GitLab, other ones in terms of like in Docker Hub or in package managers, and just like wait and see when things get tapped into, right? Docker Hub actually took like 7 days for it to get accessed in this article. But something like NPM was like minutes or something like that. Obviously, so, it's not like if bad actors will come after your stuff, it's like they already are.
Yeah.
So
just when. It's not if, it's when.
Anyway, we'll include those two articles because I thought they were interesting. The other one I had is Karmada 1.11 is released. So Karmada is an incubating project, really around multi-cluster, multi-container, and multi-endpoint management and orchestration and those kind of things. So 1.11 does release some cool new features. One is the rolling upgrade feature, which is so if you have like 3 different clouds, you can say, hey, I have a new version of this container or this application, roll it out to cluster A in this cloud first, and then I will delegate when the other ones can do that, and all from a single sort of configuration file across your different environments, which is pretty cool. So I haven't
I know
used
this
that.
is
I haven't used the project myself, but these types of things I imagine will become more and more popular.
No, agreed, right? I think in addition to the multi-cloud use case, you might have different geos in the same cloud. So serving application, an instance of your application serving the US market, another one serving the European market. You can just roll out changes at the same time. Man, that makes it simpler. I'm hoping it proceeds quickly from the incubating phase to like a more matured and graduated project. But no, this is a cool find. Thanks,
Yeah,
Ryan.
absolutely. And then one other project that I came across was Altasian created a new horizontal autoscaler for Kubernetes called Escalator. We've talked about horizontal scaling before on this show, but this is a new project that I just came across, which does some interesting things. So if you're into, autoscaling and use AWS, I think is sort of the cloud provider it supports at the moment. Cool, interesting project, open source. You can go check it out. We'll put it in the links as well. Escalator, yeah, which makes me think of like scaling up, not necessarily out, but it does support up as well.
I know they need more marketing help.
It's so hard to come up with names, right?
True. And Escalator is awesome, but it's more.
An escalator is terrifying if you really think about it. I mean, it's one of the most terrifying things we deal with in everyday life. I feel like
why?
They just like I don't know, maybe an irrational fear of being sucked into it, or like you ever see those videos that say like, here's what happened, here's what can happen to you on an escalator if you get like a piece of clothes or like a heel. It's terrifying. Don't watch those videos if you don't want to.
Like I've seen those videos, yes, but has it ever actually happened? Like,
oh, for sure. You just don't want to know when it happens.
That's true. Yeah, I'm always careful, right? Like obviously, I don't have clothes that go a lot beyond my feet. Not wearing anything that's that, but yeah. Interesting.
Maybe I'm living in a bubble, but speaking of escalators, I went to a mall in this area recently that had a separate escalator for a cart. Have you ever seen those?
Ooh, yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I know, maybe I'm not used to like huge malls because I don't like going to them. You can put your whole cart and it brings it up separately if there's 2 floors to it. I mean, it makes total sense.
I saw that in like the Target in New Hampshire. So yeah,
that's the one I'm talking about. That's literally the one. Anyway, totally off topic on escalators. Thanks for that. All right, let's get back on topic. We are going to have a discussion with Ofir Cohen, the CTO of Container Security at Wiz. We're really excited about this conversation because security is always an awesome topic. So without further ado, let's get Ofir on the show. All right, Ofir, welcome to Kubernetes Bytes. It's so good to have you on the show. Let's start with giving our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So, hi, Ryan. Hi, Bhavin. I'm excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of Kubernetes Bytes podcast. You guys are doing a great job. Welcome. I'm Ofir Cohen. I'm the CTO of Kubernetes and Container Security in Wiz, filling a customer-facing role. My role involves product management and engineering and solution architecture, and essentially ensuring that Wiz customers can deploy Wiz at scale, and how can we improve the maturity of the product by designing new features, affecting the roadmap, and prototyping new technologies and tools.
That's awesome. Like, I'm so glad. Like, I know we have spoken and connected in the past over LinkedIn because you reached out to talk about a specific episode. But man, your role sounds interesting. Like being that customer facing. So I think that brings me to my next question. Right? What are some of the challenges that you see in the cloud native ecosystem today? Like when you're talking to customers, I know right now you're in the Bay Area as well. So what gets brought up? Like the top 3 things. Like, oh, these are the things we need to solve for.
Right. So if you look at the enterprise landscape, and Wiz has over 40% of the Fortune 100 customers, most of them will have their own base image. This is just one example. I mean, container image security and vulnerabilities management is just one pillar out of so many. We have identity and access management. How do my employees access my cloud assets? And then we also have workload identities. How do my pods access databases and my S3 buckets, right? So there are so many pillars, and each organization and enterprise and startup, whatever, each one of them have more or less the same concerns, but in a different risk appetite.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So, like, you mentioned a couple of things, right? Like signing images and things like that. So, are they already like? Do they already have policies that maybe they have based it on what security was in a non-cloud native traditional world, and they are just looking for newer versions, or they're looking to vendors and industry leaders like Wiz to tell them like, okay, what should I be even doing? Like, where are they in this cycle?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if you look at the landscape 10 years ago, then we didn't have so many customers on the public cloud, right? We still had on-prem, and even nowadays we still have customers using on-prem workloads. And we see the pendulum shifting back. Adobe, for example, is a very on-prem shop for many reasons. Some of them is cost, some of them is compliance. But the thing is, when you move from on-prem to the cloud, everything becomes different, right? You cannot just lift and shift the on-prem solutions to the cloud and expect things to work. Right. One of the reasons being is that the cloud is dynamic. We have ephemeral environments, workloads come and go, and you need somehow to have end-to-end visibility and keep up with what's happening. So the pets versus cattle is one of the best examples of that.
Yeah.
And I think, like, just to wrap up your on-prem to cloud discussion, right? I think when things were on-prem, you had a data center, you had an actual physical endpoint as well to stop malicious actors from getting in, and there was a network entry point as well. Cloud, I think there are so many ways people can poke holes. I think, yeah, there is definitely a change in mindset needed.
Yeah, and I feel like on top of that, cloud is also kind of ever changing, ever updating, and so you have to keep up. Speaking of keeping up, right? This is something I think I asked you when we first met, which is like where the hell do people start? Right? Yeah. Organizations are often sort of daunted by the task of security for many reasons, right? Because security is often like thought of not first. I know you're probably trying to change that, but also there's so many sort of attack vectors, whether it's on a developer machine or in running infrastructure in production. So I guess the question to you is, where do you see people sort of starting or thinking about a strategy?
Right. It's a good question. So the first thing you need to do is you need to have a framework to evaluate your risk and prioritize them, right? You cannot fix what you cannot see and what you cannot measure and know. So you first need to have, if you want to evaluate the security posture, you need to have a threat model. And one of the ways to have a threat model is to use, and as we lean towards the next topic, is using a framework like NIST, the CSF, the Cybersecurity Framework Questionnaire. The questions, the interesting questions that you want to ask yourself is, who has access to my data, right? I get sued for hundreds of millions of dollars if I don't comply with the standards, and if I don't protect my workloads, if I don't protect my database and my buckets. What happens if the social security numbers and the PI information of my customers get stolen? This is really scary. So you need to have some kind of framework that allows you to evaluate your risk and know where the areas in which you're most vulnerable.
Do you find that, individual teams are doing these sort of evaluations, developing their own threat model, or is the business as a whole sort of developing that?
Right. For the most part, you would want tools and automation to codify this knowledge, because it's very hard to keep up. I mean, what would you do? Would you start a spreadsheet and then go over each of them and do it multi-cloud at scale? It just becomes so unmanageable. So you need to have some kind of checklist. One of them is like CIS and NIST. So one of them is a community-driven security controls, another is a federal one. You need to agree on some standard. If you're working with the Fed, you would go for NIST SP 800, right?
Okay.
It depends on your risk appetite and your risks.
But should organizations, right, like if they didn't have a security practice and this is the first time they're building it, should they start from an open source standard, or just try to cover their asses and like just make sure that they don't get sued by following whatever the government guidelines are? So where should, like, is it more community focused or vendor focused, or just comply with government regulations and you're good?
usually the regulations and the amount of money that you can get sued for is the impetus for starting, right? So the law dictates how and what you should do. But if you are not protected by any law, then you have something like SOC 2, right? You want to sell your business, your B2B SaaS to companies in the US, you have to be at least SOC 2 compliant, if not ISO 27101. And if you're not, you don't need to comply with any of these policies and compliance framework. Then at the very least, you could scan your images. Scan for vulnerability management is like the first pillar. Identity and access management, multi-factor authentication, passkeys. These are like for the 80-20. These would cover a lot. If you need to get started somewhere.
That's a good term. I use that cover the 80% a lot, but I guess in security, that's a good way to start because you have to start somewhere, right? You can't boil the ocean with all the securities, I guess, at once. So, I mean, I guess, when you have a threat model and you've done sort of the legwork and figuring out where you want to start, where you want to build out your 4080, who is ultimately responsible for security? And I know this answer is often, and it depends, but I'm curious from your perspective and what you see.
Right. The short answer is everyone. Yeah, it's very unfortunate, right? I mean, times are changing, and we need to be aware, both as platform teams and as developers, we need to be aware of the risks. One of the main challenges, if you think about software engineers in the big tech companies, they learn lead code and they learn distributed system design and they learn Go, and now they have to figure out how container orchestrators work and how do I scale and how do I do failover and resilience. So much stuff. And then they will be like, okay, we'll deal with the security thing later, right? Everyone will get admin privileges, but don't worry. We know that this privilege is very important. Right? Exactly. Let's. And then your girlfriend leaves you and you need to go home and you want to take a vacation. So you never fix this privilege stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the weirdest reasons where you are exposing your organization, but okay.
I mean, it's a pretty good one if you ask me. You don't really want to piss your girlfriend off. I mean, so we're often thinking about and talking about on this show the idea of shifting left, and you mentioned like having to learn all these new things. I think there's often especially when you're learning a new skill, to your point, there's often the assumption that security is taken care of, right? Maybe they're given a platform or that kind of thing. And they're saying, well, I'll just throw my application out of it. And I don't really need to be responsible for it. So yeah, really interesting and kind of like where do we think about, security? So I guess to that point, since there's so many services, what is a developer, or maybe what you do at Wiz, like where does the developer get involved in security?
Right. So in Wiz, we like to say that cloud native security is a team sport. When you look at the enterprise solution in the likes of Wiz, Palo Alto, CrowdStrike, etc., usually the CISO is the one driving the policy and the decisions. But you want a platform where you have point solutions that can detect vulnerabilities or can detect critical data assets and passwords and PII and things that you shouldn't have on your local disks. But the key is context. You want to be able to go from code to cloud and cloud to code. We recently, shameless plug, we launched Wiz Code that allows you to do just that. So the idea is that if I have a vulnerability in production, I don't want to just be aware that it exists. I want to know what Git commit introduced it. And I want to go back to the Git commit. And furthermore, I don't even want to think about what is the next version of the package, the JSON, the Node.js package or the Go package. I want a platform that will auto-remediate it for me. I don't want to work. So imagine a place where both developers and platform teams and the GRC, like the governance, risk and compliance people, and the CISO, everyone can just be in one portal and have a single pane of glass or even different views and perspective of what are the risks in my environment, prioritized, and this is the key. I don't want to get the alert fatigue, right? Most platforms will say, hey, these are like 1,000 CSPM findings, go fix it. It's not useful. I mean, maybe no one is able to access my workload. Maybe there is no ingress access. So I want to know just what are the critical things that I need to fix in my environment on a daily basis. And I want the developers to have a self-service portal. And I think this is where we want to be as an industry.
No, I think that like makes perfect sense to me, right? I know we were talking about the 80-20 rule, and you can fix 80% of the things easily. But if you're showing me all of those 100 things, the 20% that I'm not able to get to might be the reason I get hacked or somebody gets remote execution capabilities in my environment. So having a tool that can give you a prioritized list from a severity perspective, I think that's definitely helpful. So Ofir, let's talk about vulnerability management, right? Like you brought it up as like the first pillar. So where do people start? Like, is it something that a security team deploys and then they implement policies in terms of, oh, developers, make sure you're scanning your images, scanning your code, or they're doing more of a real-time thing? Like, how does an organization make progress on vulnerability management?
Right. So the first thing is that you need to have tools, and this is always true. You need to have platforms and tools that you can trust, right? You don't want some tool that someone developed yesterday and consult some advisories. Advisories is a fancy word for vulnerabilities database. One of them being an NVD, the National Vulnerability Database. You want a tool that you can trust, that uses the up-to-date advisories and can alert you on every given day what are the risks. The second thing, you want to know if they came from your base image. If we're talking about containers, VMs also have a similar issue, but we want to be able to pinpoint where the problem came from, and we want to do it on a daily basis and all across the pipeline. So DevSecOps is one of the fancy words for saying ingrained security in every step of the software development lifecycle.
Yep. Okay, so like, what's our recommendation, or what's Biz's recommendations? I don't really have one, but in terms of to developers, like what should they pay attention to when they're pulling base images or starting to build on top of base images, or even application code that they are copy pasting from either Stack Overflow or using Gen AI to generate some code for them?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say, if you shift mostly to the left, is to have IDE extension that you can scan before you even do git commit, right? Okay. Why waste so much time on, hey, the CI is flagging my commit as having vulnerabilities and malware? No, I want to know it before I even do the git commit. So this is the ideal position, and this is something that we recently launched a VS Code extension for Wiz that does exactly that. So you see on your package JSON that you have a problems pane, and then you see all of the vulnerable package, and you also get remediation, so how to fix them. The next thing is, even if I was even if I didn't notice or didn't install the extension, I want my CI/CD pipelines to have the guardrails in place. So I don't want any commit to be pushed unless it was scanned for vulnerabilities. Finally, we have the, if we're talking about Kubernetes, we have admission controllers that they are the gatekeepers that sit at the front of the API server. Remember, Kubernetes is an API-driven machine or system. So we want to gate just one moment before it actually runs and deploys in production. We want to know whether this container image was scanned for vulnerabilities. I mean, we have ChatGPT today. Let's not kid ourselves. Everyone goes to LLMs and they're like, you know what? I'm lazy. I'm not going to write YAMLs. Life is too short to write YAML files, right?
Yep.
So I go to my chat and I say, hey, generate this YAML manifest for my Nginx application and my Go backend. And it will do just that. But God only knows who built this container image, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I like that idea of, things, well, I should say things, automation moving closer to the developer. So it's one thing for us to say the developer should do more and shift left, but also awareness is only half the battle, right? And for asking them to do more is the hard thing. So having like automation, if I'm writing a YAML file and it detects an image, like go ahead and automatically go tell me what the CVEs are and how to fix them. That's very helpful versus, we had a bullet point in here on how to manage CVEs, and I'm a big fan of Murphy's Law. I believe in it. Yep. Meaning, if you don't fix a CVE, it probably will be the thing that gets you hacked. To your point before. So I guess that's another question to you is like, how do you manage these from the developer perspective, but also are there tools for catching these things when they're, being pushed to an environment? Meaning if I've scanned it and didn't do anything about it, if I'm trying to push this into an environment, can we not deploy the thing if we detect it later on in the pipeline?
Yeah. And before you start, I want to just add to this question. So what about day two? Like maybe today it's not a vulnerability that's being documented by NVD, or it's not even a thing that can be exposed. If it's running in production on the 100th day, how do we handle that scenario? Like, who is the developer supposed to look at the NVD database or the tool every day and figure out, oh man, this code that I pushed has a CVE now?
Good point.
No, it's a great question, and I like Ryan's point. Security is a continuous and ongoing effort. You may have scanned everything and everything was perfect at the time you pushed it, but as you said, there are 0-day vulnerabilities and the environments are changing. The data is changing, everything is changing. So what you want to do is, in addition to have the guardrails on your CI/CD and your IDE, you want to have runtime, real-time monitoring and threat management. So threat detection. So the idea is, if you could scan your environment, if you could take a snapshot, right? Because it's a moving, you have lots of moving parts. So you need to have some kind of a snapshot to say, this is the moment I try to ask what are the vulnerable workloads in my environment. Mm-hmm. Then you would also get the 0-day threats. And if you use anomaly detection and behavior analysis, then you can detect things that you didn't even know were exploitable.
Sure. Oh, yeah. That's a valid point.
Yeah. It's a defense in depth. It's never one tool. People always say like, oh yeah, I'll do vulnerability management. Oh yeah, I'll use passkeys and MFA and I'm good to go. No, you should sleep with one eye open. You should go to bed and you should ask yourself, what else did I miss? So you need to have the guardrails all along the way, not gates. You need to have tools that...
Man, you're just adding to my anxiety. I don't know why.
I was gonna say, hopefully you're sleeping and letting the automation sleep with both eyes open, right?
No wonder your girlfriend broke up, man.
Yeah, you're not getting enough sleep. That's it. Cool. So we had another one in terms of like workflows. Often one of the first things we think about with our applications, at least, is how to manage secrets. So, and often we're like, oh, we'll just use Kubernetes Secrets Manager or like Vault. We'll just throw our stuff in there and usually like set it and forget it. That should be good enough. Tell us why that's not good enough.
Yeah, this is one of actually my favorite topics, and I gave a talk about it 2 months ago in San Francisco, the first CNCF meetup. So when you think about the secrets management, the first thing that developers would do, and I did that when I graduated from computer science. I wrote my first Node.js application or Go application. You're like, okay, I just need to see that the database works. I promise, I know I will read it from environment variable, right? And then you do the git commit and no one detects that you have admin and password embedded in your code. And we saw it. I mean, one of the most famous breaches was in 2019. I cannot disclose the name of the company, but it's in the transportation industries. And because some developer left the keys in the public GitHub repo, attackers were able to exfiltrate tons of data, and they were sued for hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, you don't want to go there, right? So this is the first thing, a sales thing that you would do. You would commit your credentials and authentication tokens to the code. The next thing you would say, okay, I'm going to decouple the configuration and the secrets from the app, and I'm going to delegate it into some secrets manager, and I'm going to use environment variables, all the best practices. Very, very good. The main problem with that is that key management and secrets management is hard, right? You need to be able to rotate them. You don't want long-lived tokens. They are the root of all evil. what you want to do is you want to have a scoped and very short-lived token to reduce the chance of a threat actor that compromises your pod to be able to steal them and later use them. So I'm not against Secrets Manager. I think Vault and HashiCorp Vault and AWS Secrets Manager and External Secrets Operator for Kubernetes, they are all very good things, except for the toil and the governance and all of the overhead around operationalizing it. So if you know what you're doing, sure, go ahead. The most modern approach to actually do that, and this is what I would recommend to do, is to use a concept called workload identities. You essentially create a trust between your S3 bucket or RDS database and your Kubernetes cluster, and you have a contract that does token exchange. So it's a lot of voodoo and magic under the hood, right? You have like Kubernetes mutating admission webhook and a daemon set and all kinds of these fancy buzzwords. But in a nutshell, you get from the cloud provider short-lived and scoped access, and this is the best practice nowadays.
Okay, go ahead.
Does that also work, between two applications, right? In the sense that, say you're a developer, you're writing an API and some web server, and you have some bearer tokens that need to be rotated, but you're doing it through secrets today, so you kind of have to do that manually. Does that contract work? You described S3. Does that also work sort of intra-cluster as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. The whole identities, and this is a topic that I'm super passionate about, Kubernetes identities and access management. So you have standards like SPIFFE for workload-to-workload authentication and authorization. And then you have JOT tokens and OAuth for workload to cloud, so Kubernetes to cloud. You need to be aware of the different ways that workload to workload can communicate with each other. It's a very complex topic. We're getting there in terms of blogs and tools, but I feel like we're still not there.
Gotcha.
For that scenario, right, are people looking at security tools or they are looking at service meshes? Like, I can set those rules inside a service mesh layer, and that can avoid that communication or drop that communication from unauthorized apps.
Yeah, this is one approach, doing a service mesh. But when you go multi-cluster, then it becomes even more challenging. Right?
Okay, that makes sense. I think multi-cluster is not something I thought about, so thank you. My question originally was, if my cluster has that identity capabilities to talk to S3 or talk to anything outside the cluster as well, if my cluster gets compromised, is that it? Like my entire estate is gone or vulnerable now? Or is there a way to do it securely, right? That even if somebody got access to an API server or a pod was deployed that had some sort of remote execution capabilities, workload identities can kind of help me in that scenario.
They would help you in the sense that even if the workload was compromised, a few moments later, say a few hours later or a few days later, the attacker won't be able to use the credentials to access any of the assets.
Okay. So it is time limited and rotating as well.
Exactly.
Okay. Makes sense. Cool. So I know we spoke a lot about challenges and shifting left and all these workflows, right? We brought up Wiz a couple of times, and then I know like Ryan and I have covered like all the different funding rounds and acquisition rumors and everything that Wiz has gone through over the past 6 to 9 months. But can you give us a high level overview of what is Wiz and how is it trying to solve the challenges that we discussed?
Sure. So Wiz was founded almost a little bit more than 4 years ago. It is the fastest growing startup in world history, not just in Israel.
Yeah. Even compared to OpenAI, come on.
I mean, OpenAI is its own thing. They spend so much. Yeah, they spend.
Those guys just kill all graphs. Like I saw that a graph. Sorry to interrupt you often, but I saw a graph where the fastest to like 5 million MAU or something like that, and OpenAI is like everything else was like months and years, and OpenAI was like I don't know, just a matter of days or weeks, and like they are operating at a different scale. Sorry, go ahead. Let's talk about Wiz though.
No, this is correct. OpenAI is an alien technology. Wiz connects to your environments and it provides you with visibility, performing inventorying and risk correlation across all the pillars from all traditionally different silo domains. So usually vendors talk about CSPM, cloud security posture management, like I have public S3 bucket, or I have my security group open to 0.0.0.0, etc., etc. But then there are so many other pillars. You have data security posture management, and then you have CWPP. And the idea is that each pillar in its own is very important, but what you want to do is to get the insights and remediation guidance that you could seamlessly integrate into your day-to-day workflows, right? Mm-hmm. We started with Wiz Cloud, where the idea was to protect the infrastructure and on a daily basis to have continuous security posture and compliance scanning. And then we did that using agentless, and this was one of the most innovative approaches, using the graph, modeling everything in a computer science-like way. So asking questions like, if a pod get compromised on my Kubernetes cluster, what can the threat actor do, right? Can the threat actor access my other resources, my GCP buckets maybe? And this is a very hard question to answer because doing it multi-cloud, you need to have so much expertise. You need to have researchers, and this is what we have in Wiz. We have the security research team that is exposing very novel things that no one would even imagine, right? So you want the expertise across all the clouds. A lot of companies are multi-cloud, whether they want it or not. You have merger and acquisitions. You buy a company. It's not like Facebook buys a company and all of a sudden everyone is on-prem. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
You have production, you have business critical and money-making machines, and you want them to continue making money for you. So the challenge is huge. We call it the hybrid cloud in Wiz. So the first thing you need to do is you need to have visibility and inventory of what you have, and then you also want to do it agentlessly in order to keep up with what's changing. If I have to install an agent on each machine, it will take me years. I have to open a ticket, and this someone is on vacation, and we all know how this movie ends. So
yeah. No, I like the graph way of thinking about it. Right, like looking at social media companies and how they actually build these social networks. That was their thing. Like they used a graph database and made it easier for a security company to take in the same principles and figure out like, okay, if this gets exposed, how does it connect to other? Okay, I didn't know that. So, and I do want to take my comment back about not being the fastest, because I remember like OpenAI has been around for a while. I think we started in 2020, and going from there to close to $1 billion ARR, man, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's not bad.
So you mentioned security researcher, and this is sort of off topic, but Wiz has security researchers as like employees, or externally you use them. Yeah. What do they do? I'm just kind of fascinated. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate and lucky to be working with them in the same building. They are super talented people that I really don't know. I ask myself how do they come up with this stuff? And it's not just like the complex stuff that everyone thinking about. Sometimes it's very silly. They recently gave a talk at KubeFM by the security research team. I highly recommend it. It's an episode by and Eli Aloni.
Yep.
And people are just being sloppy. People are using Helm V2 that has the tiller component.
Yeah.
So you have so much technical depth and legacy. If you ever worked in any of the companies, that you know that it's very hard to keep up with what's changing. So they somehow have these instincts and insight to ask the right questions. Like, if I inject this file on disk, who is going to access this file? How can I impact the controller, the cloud controller that reads file from disk? Oh, I have access to this file system. Very good. Let's see what happens if I write. They come up with very innovative approaches, and they also bring a ton of experience from their military service.
Sure. Yeah.
So Israel is known for a very good cybersecurity hub and security research team.
So, is this the same team that kind of does red teaming as well for any new products that Wiz is launching, or these are focused on security and then there's like a separate red team as well?
Separate.
Okay, gotcha. Cool, nice.
So speaking of those researchers and what they look for, the ones that are probably really easy to spot is when things are misconfigured, or maybe they're not. But we as humans are pretty terrible at using our big fat thumbs to screw things up. And now we have, like you said, Gen AI bots that we're just saying, how do I do this? And then probably taking it and not thinking about our security posture whatsoever. So, how much of a problem is misconfiguration by either humans or automation, and kind of what do we do or what can we do to watch for these types of things?
Right. So the interesting thing about misconfiguration is that if you look at Gartner reports, this is one of the top 5.
Yeah.
It still is. It has been like that for years, and it's only growing. And the reason is the complexity. I mean, let's take an example. You take an AWS gateway with an AWS Lambda. There are so many different ways to configure and provision it. And I'm not just talking about the VPC and the security groups. Like, it's so hard to get it right and keep up with all the options and combinations. And, we'll fix this security thing later, yada, yada. So the defenders need to get it right all the time, and attackers only need to build it once. So
that's fair.
You need to be reactive and proactive about it. You need to continuously scan your environment for compliance and security posture and infrastructure as code scanning. And ideally, you would prevent it from being pushed to Git.
Yep. And I think the gated things that we mentioned earlier in the discussion, right? Like starting from the VS Code extension to all the way to admission controllers in Kubernetes are a way to catch, hopefully giving us enough defense in depth to catch all of these things before they become an issue. I think I wanted to also ask about, I know we referred to single pane of glass before, but is that a thing? Like, do we expect organizations to have a single security dashboard or an operations center view where everybody is logging in, or we don't need to bother developers with infrastructure side of things? So maybe the tool itself has different views. So what's it like? Where do you see this? Like, is it a single pane of glass, or multiple teams have their own views of the dashboard?
The trend is obviously consolidation. If you read any report and you look at the market, no CISO wants 500 tools. It's very, very hard to keep up with what's going on. That's why in Wiz we have hundreds of integration, and it's growing every year because customers and organizations, they want to have one-stop shop. I hate this term, but it is what it is. You don't want, think about training your employees, telling your developers, oh, you need to learn this UI, and to platform teams and security engineering, you need to learn that UI. And then you create a problem of vocabulary. I mean, how you have many people in the same room talking about issues, and then you need to have so many meetings. We want to cut the middleman. This is the goal. This is the ideal. We want to have a SaaS platform or self-hosted, doesn't matter, but that everything is intuitive and you can navigate from production, from cloud to code and code to cloud. I don't want 6 different platforms. I want a single source of truth and a single pane of glass, and I don't have anything else with single.
Nice. I get the point, right? Like everybody talking the same language is definitely important. But do you see, like with platform engineering, right? Like with DevSecOps, like platform engineering is also a big thing in our ecosystem. Do you see integrations into IDPs as a thing? Like, if the developers are using Backstage or Cortex or some other IDP, they see the security things there, even though like under the covers it's the same platform. Do you see different integrations with different tools, or no? If you want to do anything with security, go to this UI.
Yeah, so in platform engineering, the term we use is golden path. You want to have a way to provision new projects and new microservices very easily, and you want to have the governance and compliance and security ingrained, right? So as soon as I generate my Terraform or I generate my GitHub, I want to have all the scans for my repository in place. The main problem is that these tools, I mean, I like Backstage and I like Port.io, but I think we are not there yet in terms of integrating IDPs with security compliance. It's a big target, and it's very hard to keep up with the changes. But we will get there, I'm sure.
No, thank you for that honest feedback, right? Like if people are evaluating tools, they need to have this information, so that helps. Makes sense.
Switching gears a little bit about, all these topics are also very important and interesting, but sometimes it helps our listeners to get sort of some real world use cases and examples. So question for you, Ofir, is can you talk about any of your success stories when it comes to your customers or people you've worked with on sort of starting from a certain point and getting to a level of security that is, proper, I guess I'll use.
Yeah, in Wiz we call it the Log4j moment.
Okay.
When Wiz started, the four founders of Wiz are serial entrepreneurs. They founded another company called Adalom, which they sold to Microsoft for 350 million after like 3 years. So
Sure.
very, very impressive. When they launched Wiz, they had, sometimes when you're a visionary, you think of Steve Jobs and the iPhone and faster horses. People don't even know. People can't imagine how the future would look like. So you need to come with some innovative approach. And back in the Log4j days, I remember Asaf, the CEO, he said, who leaves Microsoft in the midst of the pandemic? The world is coming to an end. I'm leaving Microsoft to start a new company. I mean, what the hell am I doing? And it's so hard, even when you have the credentials and you have the network and you have the right talent, it's very hard to get the early customers and early adopters. But then you have things like Log4j. And I remember that we wanted to get some very large profile customers in the automotive industry, and they're like, no, this is cute. We'll talk to you later. We don't need you. And then Log4j came, and it was a mess. We didn't even have SBOM back then, but Wiz generated SBOM even before it was called SBOM. So we were able to do the inventorying and tell you in split seconds, less than a second, we were able to tell you, here are all the machines that are affected by the Log4j exposure, and here is how you fix it. It sounds simple. It sounds like a simple question to solve, but back then, you didn't have a vendor that did that. And Wiz did it like, they were stoked. They saw it, and it's like technology living in the future. It's like, where did you get this alien technology from? So, this is
the Log4j was definitely like a pivotal moment, right? Like everybody was panicking. People didn't even know where those binaries or packages were being used. And if a tool can give you like a complete overview, like, oh, go fix this, you have an order of doing things for sure.
Exactly.
I think one more question before we wrap this up, though. It is more around like when people think about ransomware, and there is like a parallel industry in terms of ransomware insurance. And if you get hit, you collect insurance and you pay off the ransom, and you're good to go. Is there a similar industry being built for cloud native security, for like cloud native insurance or cloud native security insurance?
Sounds like a business idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like an idea for a startup.
Okay, let's patent that. Trademark that right now. No, okay.
I would say one thing about it, though, about ransomware. Lots of companies still don't fully implement infrastructure and code and GitOps. So, and they do backups, but they never test the backup, right?
Yep.
So you want to set RTO and RPO, which are two KPIs for actually, knowing if your backup strategy is useful and working. I would say this is the first thing. The second thing is you want to have the backup in place. And the third thing is that you need to have threat detection and threat intelligence and real-time monitoring, and you need to be able to restore your environment in split seconds. I was under a crypto mining attack 2 years ago in a startup that I worked, and they just down my entire Azure tenant without notice. Yeah, it was a 0-day attack, a supply chain attack. It happens all the time. And I didn't even know that I had it. I just got an email, hey, we shut down your environment. They didn't even explain. They didn't bother to explain it later. It took me a few days. And then you become like so paranoid. It's like, okay, so how do I, like, what? You don't trust. I was entering the room. I was running the engineering, and I was like, okay, so who did that? I'm looking at faces. I try to make it a joke, but it's very hard. it's very hard to protect yourself against this kind of stuff.
Oh, that's true. I think that brings us to our last question, right? This has been an amazing discussion of it. But if people want to learn more about the NIST frameworks or the different frameworks that they can use to build their own set of guidelines, if they want to learn more about Wiz, where can they go to get started with all of these follow-up questions?
I would say try pitch, peach.wiz.io. It's a very interesting Kubernetes and cloud native security frameworks to look at. Wiz.io/customers to see customers' testimonials and how more and more customers are leaving their existing security vendors and utilizing Wiz. For example, Wiz Image Trust is one, and we didn't get to talk about it, but this is one of the most noble innovations that we did in the space of software supply chain. So being able to do keyless signing, I don't need to think about key management and key revocation, and I can also tie the scan to a certain policy, so I know that I don't have secrets or CVEs in my containers.
Okay.
Not only are they signed, but they also conform to my policy. So this is innovative and noble, and no other vendor, as we currently know, actually does that.
Okay. It's awesome.
Bob, and I was thinking about how when Ofir was saying that people take backups and don't test them, it's kind of like the equivalent to our Dagger episode with Push and Pray. It's like just back up and pray.
Yeah.
You're just like, why isn't that a thing?
You should be praying at work. Come on, test everything.
Oh, that's good. Well, Ofir, I think this has been an awesome episode. Every time we talk about security on this show, I know we get a lot of great feedback because there's endless information of kind of the overwhelming amount of things that people need to think about with security. So it's always a welcome topic. And thank you for helping us kind of walk through and explain some of what you've been kind of working on and what you're up to at Wiz. And we'll make sure and put all those show notes and links for our listeners. And we'll have to have you back on the show in the future.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Bhavin, that was another great security talk. I know we've had a number of them on the show. We'd probably have to go back and actually count how many, but I feel like I learn new things or think about different things each time. I know Ofir had a lot to talk about. So, personally, I like the sort of idea that Wiz, where he works, kind of takes a holistic approach to security, right? I often am involved in like a very particular point of security when it comes to platform engineering, when thinking about the whole. Obviously, there's so much, right? So I know that's why I sort of asked a few different questions around like, where the hell do you start? And I know, though, those sort of frameworks that he talked about, or NIST, is a great way to think about it. So if as we were talking, I was thinking if you took one of these frameworks or sort of papers or guidelines and then kind of ran through those with the mindset of solving 80% or of making a plan for 80% of your security, that's a great starting point. It's probably a ton of work still.
It is, but I think to that end, right, I think there are tools. I want to say Kubescape, the Armo guys, the discussion that we had, where they have actually codified the NIST or the NSA security framework, and you can actually run your security tool against your app and infrastructure, and they check for the compliance with this set of recommendations, and it gives you specific things. So there are people in the community, vendors and open source contributors that are making things easier. We just have to use them, just a small part.
I feel like every time we talk about this, right, and we talk about shifting left, which has been a very big topic probably over the last couple of years, right? I don't love this idea of shifting left when we talk about it in that sense, because I feel like it puts the necessity on the developer to implement security. And while that's great, I think it should be a parallel thing, right? Meaning like this entire idea that a company like Wiz exists and can come into your company and help you better your security posture doesn't mean we're not still shifting left.
Yep.
But I feel like that security team and or vendor and or whatever still needs to exist because you have to have your tentacles in there to make sure you're meeting compliance and whatnot, and having that single pane of glass. I mean, to Ofir's point, like that's the ideal scenario, is I have one place to look. So.
And I think Ofir also brought up this interesting point, right, where developers, when they're prepping for interviews or just building their skill set, they're going to places like Lead Code and still trying to code linked lists and reverse linked lists. And I don't know, I haven't given a developer based interview in a long time, but like you're focused on algorithms and how to write code. I have rarely anecdotally heard scenarios where organizations are asking security-based questions. So if you expect that developer to join your organization and take on these responsibilities, maybe add that as a step, maybe make that an industry practice. Like, you have to think about security even in like an interview round.
Yeah, and I'm sure maybe for platform or SRE or those kind of things, maybe security makes it a way in, but developer alone, you're right. At least historically, have not thought about like a trick question around, hey, implement this, what's wrong with it, or what can you do security wise?
Yep.
Maybe they do, because we haven't done a developer interview in 20 years. But
20 years, what's with you and age today? Like,
just feeling it today.
No, I think I agree, right? Having that additional round definitely helps, because new college grads, SE2s, SE3s, if you want everybody to be involved, I think it should be everybody's responsibility and not just your principal or your distinguished engineers that are approving PRs and going through your code. So, for sure.
I think it's kind of like security is kind of like the diet to our lives, right? It's like we always have to be aware of it, but we don't like to think about it or actually do it.
I know, but I don't do a great job on my diet, so
exactly. This is the point, right? It's the thing that has to happen, but we're all there.
It has to be like top of mind at least. Like every day, you have a weighing scale, you have a single pane of glass to tell you suck, fix it.
And on that note, when we're really picking ourselves up today in age and diet, but I hope your diet's going better, Mr. or Mrs. Listener, or whoever you are. That being said, we're going to wrap it up now. Just a quick reminder, please join our Slack. I know we do get people trickling in there. I want to get back to using that some more. So, please join, interact, introduce yourself, let us know about some episodes. Go check out our website, KubernetesBytes.com. And of course, join our YouTube channel as a subscriber. I think we hit like 400 recently, which seems like a milestone since has it been a year or two? Or I don't know. It's been a couple seasons. We're super popular.
Yeah.
So,
slowly and steadily, dude. Like that.
I'm proud of those 400. Thank you to you.
I know.
Thank you to you, 400 people.
For the audio listeners that haven't done that, come on, get us higher.
Anyway, all right, Bhavin. That brings us to another end of episode. I'm Ryan.
I'm Bhavin.
Thanks for joining another episode of Kubernetes Bytes. Thank you for listening to the Kubernetes Bytes podcast.